Hello, BookTube. All right, we're on part 2 of our 4K, but not that 4K Q&A. And we are up to John Garganarakis. How was Jordan Peterson's new book? Oh, my. Oh, my. It was bad. It was bad in intentional ways. The first one became a phenomenon that when he wasn't sure that it was going to. This one is a book written by someone who expects that he is writing a phenomenon. So it adds an element of kind of soiling distaste to the stupidity of the first book. But you had other questions, didn't you? Do you think his comeback will amount to anything? In other words, will he continue to have prominence in the current so-called culture wars, or is 15 minutes close to being up? No, they're not. No, they're not. Because he characterized himself as a prophet. I alone see the truth. You have strayed from the truth. I will tell you the truth. In hoary incantatory prose that doesn't quite make sense. Mystical prose. I will tell it to you in that sense. I won't use religious terminology. Instead, I'll use bastardized academic and psychological terminology. But I'll still make it mystical enough so that every vaping 20-year-old man in his lonely little weightlifting room can see what he wants in it. He was already a prophet. He already very much intentionally set himself up as a prophet. Someone who, when you ask him a simple question, will furrow his brow and dip his head a little because he wants to convey the impression that the profundities that he is thinking are so much work to wrestle into a terminology that you will understand. It's not that he's thinking about the subject. It's that he's thinking about the way to transmit what he's thinking into words that you will understand. And if you think about it, that is also the attitude of every prophet. They are translating what God says to them into something that you can understand. If you could understand it directly from God, he'd say it directly to you. Instead, they are a mouthpiece for a greater wisdom, an otherworldly wisdom. He does that all the time. He does it without even thinking now. That's just his standard way of answering anything. Hey Jordan, is the bus due anytime soon? When he does that parsing pause, it's not because he's trying to figure out what to say. It's because he's trying to figure out how to simplify it so that you will understand it. So he was already characterizing himself as a prophet. And there was an element missing to extend his 15 minutes of fame. And that was a resurrection narrative, and now he has it. Because he drugged himself into a coma and then came back from that coma. So, no, I don't think his 15 minutes are over at all. His book was awful, though. Just awful. Logan Mortensen says, "Hi, Steve. Thoughts on the recent passing of Larry McMurtry? Very sad. Very sad. Also, I recently discovered Dana Fuller Ross's Holt's Dynasty and Wagons West series. Would you recommend either of them?" I would recommend them. You get lost in them. I don't recommend them as great literature. It almost feels sacrilegious to have them mentioned in the same question as Larry McMurtry. I recommend Larry McMurtry far more, okay? I know that I always say there's no wrong way to read, and that's true. And if you're reading Dana Fuller Ross and you're really liking those books, more power to you. Go right ahead. But let's not lose sight of the obvious stuff here, right? You're spending a lot of time. The Wagons West series is enormous. You're spending a lot of your reading time doing that. Your reading time would be better spent reading all of Larry McMurtry. Even the Lonesome Dove sequels and prequels, which I hate, are still much better, and you'll like them more. It's not just they're better for you, you'll like them more. He was a great American literary figure. The only thing, I felt very sad when I learned the news, like everybody else. I learned the news from Twitter. I felt very sad and appreciative, because he's hardly written anything that I didn't love, or at least that didn't make me think. And yet, there was a negative element, because the same day Beverly Cleary died, and the reactions weren't anywhere the same. The shaved head literary dude bros were out in force saying, "Oh, McMurtry, man, yeah, he's the greatest. Lift your bourbon to McMurtry, he's the greatest. Oh, I have a copy of his book in my tackle shop, and in my other tackle shop, and in my third tackle shop." And there wasn't that kind of a reaction to Beverly Cleary when her books reached more people and were just as great. And so, on the one hand, I was sorry, of course. It was inevitable. It comes to all of us, even sexy 28-year-olds. But on the other hand, it was a case study of the kind of ingrained reflexive sexism that a lot of people reacting against the sort of SJW fascism of the 21st century have reacted against their claims of ingrained institutional sexism to the point where they say it doesn't exist at all. It certainly does exist, and you don't need a clearer example than that. Two great literary figures, I would argue equally great, but one with far, far greater reach than the other, dying on the same day and getting radically different reactions. To the point where, I mean, I tweeted out my condolences and my death notice to both of them. I did that for both of them, and I called them both great American novelists, and I had a bunch of people email me and say, "Oh, come on." Anyway, Marcus says, "Do you have a least favorite book of all time, and if so, what is it?" Yes, I do. It's The Love Letter by Kathleen Sheen. Rather easily. Yeah, not only is it my least favorite book of all time, but it's the worst book ever written. In any category, in any genre. It's the worst book ever written. Rajni Singh says, in a recent Q&A, you mentioned that you would like to start another book club. Can you please start an online book club via Zoom? I believe many people around the globe, including me, would love to be a part of it. I love that idea. I love it. Where we have a regular monthly book club on Zoom. I don't know how it would work. This is where we run into the fact that I'm not technically very adept. I know that you can only have a limited number of people on Zoom, whereas on StreamYard you can have a lot more. But when I watch things like that, live stream discussions like that, I always sort of prefer a small number of participants. When there are 20 people on those things, I don't know who to listen to. It all seems like a gaggle. So maybe I would stick with Zoom. I think it's a great idea. I would love it. I would love to know how to do it. The logistics, doing it is not a problem at all. I would sign up in a heartbeat. If I could easily make it happen, I would sign up in a heartbeat. We'd just pick a book for every month. I would pick the book for every month, and we would just do a book club, the Steve Donoghue book club, where you are perfectly welcome to read along. I would love that. That would be so much fun. But it would be a question of technology, wouldn't it? Because I'd want other people involved. I'd want more heads involved. If we're going to do Zoom, you'd want other people involved. Who would those people be? I'd need regular participants. I'm not sure that anybody would be willing to sign up for that. But I should think about it. Let's see here. Steve Watson says, I love reading history books by Anthony Beevor, Max Hastings, James Holland, and Rick Atkinson. Well, you picked 4 good ones, didn't you? Can you recommend any up-and-coming history writers that I should investigate? Oh my, I'm terrible at this. Writers who are young, I don't think about them. I don't know. I would have to research actual birth dates, compare those birth dates to works that I thought were really good, and then maybe make a video of young historians. That wouldn't be a bad video to do. But I can't do it off the top of my head. I don't know anybody's birthday. And how many times on this channel have I said confidently, oh, so-and-so must be dead? Only have 30 of you say, no, they're still alive. I played golf with them last week. Brian Bird says, what would you recommend to have knowledge of to start reading the Metamorphoses of Ovid or the Divine Comedy of Dante? I've attempted these a couple of times and seem to get lost in references. Just roll with it and keep going. Thanks for everything you do and for the wonderful slice of booktube. Well, it's a lot easier to just read and keep going with Ovid than it is with Dante, I believe. Dante spikes his book with allusions and references that if you don't have any idea what they are, you're not going to know why you just read the passage that you read. You're just not. The passage won't work without knowing what you're reading. Unfortunately, there's a cure for that, because we have Tom L.A. Books is doing a read-along, canto by canto, of all of the Divine Comedy. And it's amazing. He is an incredible guide to this. Just incredible. So I would say, I don't know if he's made a playlist out of his videos, but go to his channel, start with Canto 1, and just read the Divine Comedy along with him. You'll never have a better guide for it. With Ovid, I would say, yeah, just keep reading. Don't worry about the references at all. The references in Ovid don't really mean as much. He's mainly telling you stories. So I think you can blast ahead without checking references. Definitely don't check references if compulsively, especially if doing so is hurting your reading experience. Because there's wonder in both those books. An endless amount of wonder in both those books. You should do what you can to clear away the obstacles between you and that wonder, because they really are worth it. Let's see here. Jamal Al-Batashi says, From the many, many videos that doesn't even quarter of all the content of your channel, I watched from you. I didn't hear you talk or excite your brain about Nigel Tranter, the Scottish author. Number one, how do you see his portrait of kings and kingship? Number two, how much of his novel Lion Let Loose of James I is near to your heart and brain? Number three, do you like his early castle books? Number four, I'm kind of wanting to your take on James I of Scotland, his life and rule. Good Lord. No, Nigel Tranter is not mentioned on BookTube, despite the fact that he was, in his day, unbelievably widely read. And I don't have any Nigel Tranter at all. It's been years since I read any. And James I of Scotland, I don't think I've read. I read a biography of him that came out about 30 years ago that I kind of liked. Couldn't for the life of me tell you the author, though. And there hasn't been one since, so that I know of, at least in the U.S. Probably it wouldn't get published in the U.S. But a Nigel Tranter revival, I would love. Nigel Tranter ebooks, probably doesn't exist in ebook form. But imagine a nice uniform set of a bunch of his books. That would be great. I like him. I like all the books that you mentioned, but it's been too long. I would need to read them again. And on JFK, where do you place the Nigel Hamilton biography, JFK Reckless Youth? It's terrific. Terrific reading. And did you come across a biography of JFK that approaches it in persona and writing? That's tricky. Nigel Hamilton is terrific. Absolutely terrific. Not just on JFK, but on anybody. But as to a biography of JFK... the new one, the brand new one, Longueval's biography, it's only part one, but it was pretty engrossing to read. So I am reappraising it after a bad negative first reaction. I'm reappraising it, but Nigel Hamilton, in terms of readability and persona, Nigel Hamilton is pretty tough to top. Boy, what a book that was! What a lot of fun that was. I wonder if I still have a copy. I probably gave it away. Oh, anyway, Alan Black says, can you rate your top 5 Thomas Pynchon novels? Just kidding. I'm going to assume you've already read it, but what is your opinion of the book, The Neverending Story? I have read it. I don't love it the way its fans do. I know it has just devoted fans who live and die by it, but it struck me as pretty bad. And I don't know if that means I just need to read it again, or maybe something I counter it in a different mind frame, but yeah, it's not a fantastic thing for me the way it is for so many fans. Pete's Pensive says, have you bagged all the Munros in Scotland? If so, how long did it take you from the first to last summit? Oh my, I must have done them all. I've done some of them many times. Karen Gorn, for instance, I had a pretty brutal experience there. I'm pretty sure I've done them all, but there was one. I'm not Scottish, so I don't think I can pronounce its name, but it was particularly hairy because the weather came up out of nowhere. And the thing you want to worry about in a lot of the Munros is not falling, of course, and it's not exposure, really, because you're not that far away from help. I found that the thing you have to worry about is a twisted ankle. The scree there is so bad in some places that you have to worry that you're going to injure yourself in a way that will make it impossible for you to get back, even a relatively modest distance. But I not only bagged the Munros, I bagged them with dogs. What are some good starting points for nonfiction history and biography on the Weimar era in Germany? Eric Weitz wrote a great book on Weimar Germany, just I think recently, that I would definitely recommend. But there's so much that was written on it. I could do a whole video on that. Nick Piccarilli says, do you ever have any encounters with dog sled teams during your travels? Yes, I did, quite a few. Any good books about them that come to mind? Oh yes, oh my, oh my. The Iditarod alone has spawned a great many fantastic books. There's Fast into the Night by Debbie Maderow. There's Dogman by Marty Bucer. And probably best of all is Dog Song by Gary Paulson. What a book that is. Oh my. He's more famous for his YA books, but Dog Song is incredible. And I used to get this question a lot. Most people don't know what the Iditarod is, and the Iditarod itself is going to be impossible if the route isn't covered in snow. And then the route is going to stop being covered in snow because the world has changed. But the question that I got asked a lot by a lot of people over the years, over the decades. People have asked me, well, okay, what about the dogs? You're the number one fan of dogs. Surely it's cruel and unusual to do this to them. And I can tell you, I know I would love the narrative better than anybody to say that, but I have met Iditarod dog teams, and I have scarcely ever met happier dogs. The conditions are brutal. The exertions they have to go through are epic, even for dogs who are, 10 times more athletic than humans. But I've scarcely ever met dogs who were more loved, more cared for, and happier, more fulfilled. Could be just the breeds, but I can't. I can report back on the Iditarod. I can report back on a lot of different aspects of it, but I can't say that the dogs are ill-used. Anyway, the next 10 thing, the thing that should not be. Oh my God, it's a barrage of questions. Okay, all right, we'll finish out this segment with these questions. Congratulations on this milestone. Your Western Canon starter kit really inspired me to deep dive on the antecedents to modern literature. I just recently got Ovid's Metamorphoses and can't wait to dive into it. As for questions, I got a whole bunch. Hope that's okay. All right, let's see. Question number. No, okay. You number the questions, but you actually start the questions before you number them. I've heard you say you've been everywhere except Australia, so I assume you must have at some point visited Macedonia. Yes. And was just curious, what were your thoughts and impressions of the country? Did you have a nice time? Did you enjoy your stay, etc.? If so, what did you like about it? If not, why not? One of my first memories of Macedonia it wasn't quite called Macedonia at the time, but the area, you know what I mean. One of my foremost memories of the place is negative because I met bandits. You can call them by any other name. I met in some dusty, out of the way location. I met people who just wanted to rob everyone, to rob everyone, and that was an ugly situation. It made me angry, and it still makes me angry to think about it. Most of the people that I met were wonderful in the area, but also I have a strong memory of heat, so I won't be going to any of these places again. But I wonder why. Are you in Macedonia? Is that why you're asking? Anyway, the questions. Number one, what is your favorite Shakespeare play? Julius Caesar. Number two, what is your favorite English Renaissance play not written by Shakespeare? That would be The Changeling by Thomas Middleton. Get a chance to see it if anybody ever stages it. It's terrific. Number three, what are your thoughts on Shakespeare pastiches? Are there any that you would recommend? I am a student of English literature. Well, there have been enormous ones. I could do a whole video on it. What happened? Do we not like Shakespeare? The one recent one that I really liked was Macbeth by Joe Nesbo, which is a pastiche in the most general sense of the term, but I loved it. I thought it was terrific. Number four, how did you learn so many languages, and do you have any tips for someone who wants to learn more languages? Oh, there is only one way, and that is use. You have to use it. You have to use the language. Learning it as a book exercise will never teach you anything useful. It'll teach you how to say, where's the bathroom, or I'd like mustard on that. But you have to use it. You have to open your mind to use it. Open your mind and open your ears. You have to use it. And that's the way to do it. I mean, you have to learn the grammar and whatnot, but you can learn a lot of that, almost all of it, from immersion. Immersion is the only way to do it. So it's not always easy to immerse yourself in another language if you're in a monoglot culture, but so you can learn the basics and you can listen to a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's a vast ecosystem of language learning on YouTube that's free. But in the end, the way to learn it is going to be to use it. Whether you ever have opportunity to talk with a native speaker, those opportunities are invaluable, and that's why so many people go out of their way all over the world in large parts of the world. It is a coveted, wonderful thing if you have an opportunity to talk, to practice your English with an English speaker. So, and that is true for any language. But if you don't have that opportunity, at least use it in private. At least use it in writing. If you make a journal entry or 2 or 3, make a regular daily paragraph in that language. Use is the key to taking on a language. For me, in my case, it would be in immersion because I was there. I was in places where I didn't want to be separated by a barrier of language. But that's going to be true in any case. Use it, and it will be yours. But you have other questions, right? You have endless questions. Number 5, since I know you can't go into depth in a Q&A, can I get a simple yay or nay on the following authors? Oh my God, it's more complicated than a yay or nay. What would a yay or nay even mean in a situation like this? That an author can't write anything bad? I can only write things that are good? This just never works. These lists just never work. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, yay. Jorge Luis Borges, yay. Milan Kundera, I would say nay. Jack Vance, yay. Michael Moorcock, yay. D.H. Lawrence, I would say nay. Roger Zelazny, I would say largely yay. H.P. Lovecraft, I would say largely yay. Jack Kerouac, I would say largely nay. Allen Ginsberg, I would say largely nay. Jack London, I would say largely yay. But what does that help you with? What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. I get the impulse, but they don't belong in a Q&A. Let's see here. Jack Ivoniak says, you talked about your love of mega stuff Oreos. Have you ever had most stuff? Just once. Just once. My hosts up in Vermont came through with most stuff. And I felt as if I'd been transported to heaven. They are not available. In Massachusetts, that I've been able to see, they are not available. Half the time when I go to a local market or even a supermarket, half the time I'll be lucky if they have mega stuff Oreos. But most stuff, I've never seen them in Massachusetts. I covet them. I covet them in the extreme. Also, why do you sometimes pronounce literary the British way, as it were literary? It seems decidedly out of character for a Bostonian to do anything in the British way. When I say literary fiction, I'm mocking the whole subgenre. It is largely laughable, it's largely dumb, and it is largely condescending, hence literary. Mike Crease says, number 1, are you related to the historian John Donoghue? Wouldn't that be something? He wrote a wonderful history called Fire Under the Ashes that recontextualizes the English Revolution in the whole Atlantic world instead of only England or England and parts of Europe. He argues that radical Puritan ideas of New England and the Caribbean traveled back to England and were at the heart of that conflict. I don't think I'm related to John Donoghue. No, I don't think I am. I'm not sure that he'd admit it, even if I were. Question number 2, could you do us the honor of a review of the 1776 Commission report? I'm sure of where you stand. I'd just love to hear you talk about it. It's junk. Absolute junk. Racist junk. Doesn't have any sound history. You don't need to know more than a tiny bit of American history to start poking holes in it right away. It's exactly the kind of agitprop that you would expect from a neo-Nazi regime. Which is not to excuse the 1619 project that provoked it. It's not to excuse that project at all, but it itself is a joke. It's something straight out of the Soviet Union. I'm glad that the commission was disbanded. I hope that no one reads the book, and yet I know that it has a pride of place on a tiny shelf of books throughout Trumpland, right next to the Turner Diaries. Anyway, Mary Tumulty says, please share your thoughts on the new Thaddeus Stevens biography by Bruce Levine. I thought I did. I thought I did in a couple of videos. It's fantastic. It's just terrific. It's really well done. So I recommend it. Also, in the 2020 Laurie Randolph biography of Dorothy Day, the best one, or would you recommend a different one? Theirs was good, but a little bit astringent. And not a whole lot of the whole human Dorothy Day comes through in that book. I don't know if that was intentional on their part or not. At least I didn't think so. But I really want to recommend her own books. The Long Loneliness and The Day of Delight. I want to recommend her. There are collections of her own writings, autobiographical writings, letters, journals, that sort of thing. The Long Loneliness especially is amazing. Just amazing. And how nice to see somebody ask about Dorothy Day. That's kind of nice. IDIC Warrior Reads says, I have heard mention on this channel of your love of Anthony Burgess. Yes, indeed. Any recommendations of his fiction and nonfiction? Well, for nonfiction, I'd recommend his literary essays. The volume is But Do Blondes Prefer Gentlemen? Which is dumb. It's a dumb title, but the book is amazing. Any of his literary essays, his prefaces, his dashed off drunken reviews, anything like that, I strongly recommend all of those. And for his fiction, I don't recommend A Clockwork Orange. I think as in so many cases where an author is identified with one book, I don't think it's the strongest book at all. I'd recommend The Man from Nazareth. The Man of Nazareth is a novel about Jesus Christ that I think is really good, underrated. Also, Napoleon Symphony. Much as I don't like Napoleon Bonaparte, it's a great novel. Also, Dead Man in Deptford, his Christopher Marlowe book, but you need to know a little. I would read the Wikipedia entry on Christopher Marlowe a few times, nail down the facts in your mind before you read it, but it's really good. Same thing with his Shakespeare book, Nothing Like the Sun. But over and above all, Earthly Powers. His massive masterpiece, Earthly Powers, is unbelievable. It's just unbelievably good. It is a masterpiece of 20th century literature. Julie Alvar has a bunch of questions. What are we doing, Fran? Let's see. Number 1, beyond daily walks with the light of your life, do you exercise? Now, just walks. We have 3 or 4 little walks throughout the day. Whenever she wants to go out, we go out. And we have, if we can, 1 big walk. And the big walk, she is brisk. She bustles. She bustles right along. It's not like walking up Fascinate at all. So the 1 big walk can cover a lot of ground. If I'm up for it, if I'm feeling okay, and if the weather is fine, then we will do 1 big walk a day. And I might point out, I know I should do more. I should exercise for real. Exercise is not exertion. We should keep in mind. Exercise is 20 consecutive minutes of doubled heart rate. So when people say, well, I'm going to climb this flight of stairs because I need the exercise, they're not really getting exercise by doing that. They're exerting themselves. Exercise is meant to activate all sorts of chemicals in your body, burn all sorts of fats in your body. You can't do that just with exertion. And I don't really exercise in that term. But I should point out, even though I should do more, I should point out that most people don't go for brisk walks every day. And that at least they could do. And it's tremendously healthy for you. Question number 2, do you have siblings? Are you close? I do, and we're not. Question number 3, you showed us and talked about your method of personal journaling, but I was wondering if you keep separate book journals where you record what you've read, when you read it, etc. I used to have book journals. I have a whole bunch of them on the bottom shelf over here, but over time I found that it was just one more thing to do. Same thing with a little daily planner or a dream journal or an inspiration journal or a gratitude journal. Having separate books for any of those things just struck me as one more thing to do. So I have incorporated all of them into the journal that I keep, the one journal that I keep. So the journal that I keep will have a section of what I'm reading and what I thought about it, briefly. Because I'll go into length elsewhere, usually. I'll go into length elsewhere. Also, I will make sure to mention all the other things that make for separate journals. I put it all into one book now. William Fett says, let's see here, keep the videos coming. 1,000 a year sounds reasonable. It is about 1,000 a year, isn't it? What are your opinions on Arthur Haley and Alan Drury? I like them both. I wish they weren't gone. What are your thoughts on the book Portraits and Observations by Truman Capote? I like it. I like it fine. I wish I had a copy of it. I would probably find a lot. I haven't read it in a long time. I'd probably find a lot more in it now. Alan Cowley says, well, Steve, if you could just pick up the pace of production a little bit, all of your subscribers could have their very own video. You could even auction the most popular ones, NFT style. Well, I make videos. If somebody wants me to make a video personally for them, I'll gladly do that. I've done that before. Probably where you rant about Dude Bros and Jordan Peterson and retire to the Bahamas or maybe buy the rattle. I've had it pointed out to me. I have 4 friends who do booktube or YouTube for a living. And 2 of those friends, it's a very good living. 2 of them are mega huge channels. And they tell me, all the time, with a tiny tweak here or there, you could explode. And in terms of money, that's all they ever think about is in terms of money. They can't stand making videos, and they wouldn't talk to a subscriber if their life depended on it. They have a fleet of lawyers to protect them from you. I try to tell them it's radically different philosophy here. It's not just that it's a different approach, a less monetized approach. It's also a radically different philosophy. I am talking to you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not making you sit through commercials before you get to talk to me. I'm not breaking in the middle of talking to you to talk about Surfshark or NordVPN. I'm not forcing you to watch an Aspen Dental commercial that has permanently ruined Everyday People, the song Everyday People, for millions of people across the country. I'm not asking you to do any of that. I'm not doing any kinds of call to action whatsoever. I'm just talking to you. And you are doing me the great pleasure, the great honor of talking back. I try to tell this to these friends of mine, they just don't listen. They just don't hear it at all. Instead, they say, no, dude, you have a Hitchens vibe. 2 of them have said that, independent of each other. They don't know each other. 2 of them have said that. You have a Hitchens vibe. You talk in complete paragraphs, and you don't care about being controversial, and people love that. They love it. You have a colorful way of talking. If you did a reaction channel to YouTube, a YouTube reaction channel, one of these 2 really successful YouTubers said, imagine Keemstar with a brain and a vocabulary. That would be you. Those of you who don't know who Keemstar is, count yourself fortunate, because he is poison. And I wanted to tell that to these people. I wanted to say, you are telling me, you are advocating that I become a toxin just to make money. How did you get that way? That is not a good way to live. The one point they all make, all 4 of them make, is that I will never get rich talking about books on YouTube. Because nobody reads. But anyway, we're going to stop there, and we'll move on to part 3.